So let's kind of map those things out and at least be aware of them, and then think about how we want to deal with that. So methodological changes. Now, some of these changes don't have to do with the modal system. I think they're just other things that people haven't picked up. I'll talk into why about that in future presentations, but the same argument applies. That is the way I'm looking at it objectively better if we didn't have all of the baggage of history that's kind of pointing towards one way of doing things? And if it is, then the question is, which I think it is, I think I can clearly make that argument, then the question is it worth me looking at it this way, given the fact that it's different than other things in the communication problem? So one thing is we're going to be displaying the guitar fretboard with the top string on top. That means the low E string for easier visualability. So that means when I play my guitar, if I was playing the guitar on a camera, you would be facing me playing the guitar. So notice the guitar neck is going to be facing to the right. But when you're looking at the screen, your guitar neck is going to be facing the opposite direction. So what I'd like to do is flip the guitar around. So I'm going to be doing more theory stuff at the beginning here and less actually playing the guitar. But when I do play the guitar, I typically rotate the guitar around or mirror the guitar, which you can easily do in software, but no one ever does it. And I'll talk more in future presentations about why no one ever does it. But I think if you think about it and you're trying to learn the basics, it's easier to mirror what I'm doing, even though it looks like I'm left-handed, than it is to try to twist or flip the guitar in your mind. So if I flip it around this way, you have the heavy string on top. So that's one thing I'm going to do that's going to be a little bit different, which I think will be easier. Why wouldn't you adopt that if it's easier? You might say, well, because then when I watch other people, I'm going to have to flip it around in my mind, so I might as well learn that way. Okay, but I still think that it would be easier for you to first visualize in a way that allows you to learn the guitar as fast as possible. And then if you want to watch other people and be able to flip the guitar around in your mind, you can still do that. I don't think it prevents you from doing that, but that's my argument there. Platform and tools. So all learning tools and charts will be built in Excel, which we argue is the most underutilized, powerful tool for learning music. In this guitar and I'm an accountant's humble opinion, it's shocking, worrisome, and disappointing that Excel isn't standard in musical education. Now, I'm going to get into this in more detail as well, the argument on why I think Excel really, like if you're taking a music major, particularly if you're using a guitar or some other string instrument other than maybe the piano, although the piano as well with general music theory, you should be using Excel, I believe, because just normal music theory is a bunch of charts, which obviously you can create in Excel. So if you want to copy and paste and move things around, compare things, there's nothing better than Excel. And clearly with, of course, the guitar, you have a fretboard, which looks like an Excel sheet. It's a grid, which maps perfectly onto an Excel sheet. So it's amazing that nobody kind of uses Excel to map this stuff out. I'll try to talk about why I think that might be, but I think that is something that should change. Now, also note that there's a bunch of cool softwares out there, and you might say, well, look, I can use all these cool database softwares that help me. And I can kind of attest to this in a similar way as within accounting. I'm an accountant teacher as well, and I have people saying, well, look, you can just use QuickBooks, and it's a lot easier to learn with QuickBooks or some other accounting software. And the idea would be, well, that's a data input software, and you can learn with it. But notice what the problem is the design of that software is to put in a particular input and then it gives you an output, but you don't know how it got from the input to the output. So that's great for some functional use, but it's not great for learning how the system works, which of course, in particular with the guitar, that's what we want to do. I don't want to put in an input and then it spits out an output. I mean, that might be good sometimes, but what I want to do oftentimes is see how the input is being used to create the output. The most transparent way to do that is simply an Excel sheet. And just note that you can think of a database program as, in essence, a 3D version of kind of like a 2D Excel sheet. So if you go into the 3D version, you have to go into the magic box for it to magically do something. If you don't know how to code it, you're not going to see the magic work. In a 2D system and just an Excel sheet, you can create the sheet. You see all the connections. That's good. You want that if you're trying to learn how the system works. All right, anyways, learning materials, worksheets, and fretboard diagrams will follow the inverted string orientation for consistency. So in other words, when we look at guitar music, note that if you're learning something like classical piano or something like that, you're going to learn sheet music, which is very specific. It's designed to try to express exactly what the person wants you to do. Whereas if you play something like on the guitar, then it's usually more improvisy, meaning I'm going to give you the general outline of the chords and the notes and the melody, but then you can kind of jam and put those chords together in different ways. In other words, the sheet music can give you too much of a straitjacket to restrict you too much. But the chord system is sometimes too loose. It doesn't give you enough to know the general framework that I want to be working within. But notice that the tablature still kind of is created as though we're looking at the guitar this way. So it puts the little string on top. So the tablature is designed to be easier. So when you look at chord charts and tab charts, you got to flip the guitar around, which I think is just what happened traditionally, how they set up those things, and now that's kind of codified. But I would argue that you would ideally want to have the guitar mapped out this way from the perspective of us behind the guitar with the heavy string on top. So I think that's just obviously better and easier to visualize. But let me show you what I mean here. See, I'm going to put this is the low or heavy string on top of my worksheets when I map out the fretboard. I'm not going to have this be the high string, the one closest to the floor when you're playing. But if you look at tablature, that's the way it's laid out, right? Meaning this string up top is not the one closest to the ceiling when you're playing. It's oftentimes the small string. And when you look at chord charts, sometimes they put it vertically. So now the guitar is orientated downwards. I think that's their attempt to try to get it closer to the top, but it's still as though you turned the guitar from here, like you rotated it so the fretboard is vertical. But you don't visualize the guitar that way. You visualize it this way. So you might as well write it down as easy as possible. Now, again, you can argue that I don't want to do that. I want to learn it with the little string on top because that's how traditional tablature is written, and it's going to make it harder for me to read later. Now, I don't think that's a valid argument because I think that you can learn to rotate the guitar around in your mind. What you want to do is, when you're thinking about the theory, is to focus all of your attention on the theory. I want to orient the guitar in a way that allows me to focus directly on the theory and then be able to rotate it around. I don't think it restricts you from being able to visualize the guitar from different angles at later times when you're looking at different resources and whatnot.